So anyway, I think we're ready to go. So I just want to say welcome. I want to just do a little plug for our high water project before we delve in. I'm going to start with Carolyn. And the high water project, for those of you who haven't spotted it, is basically what we're calling it a kind of celebration and a vigil for the equinoctial high tide, which is the high tide that happens at the end of March, which is the highest tide of the year. Around the world, it's the highest tide of the year. And we are basically doing a 12-hour, actually 12 plus, because it'll be a whole tide cycle. It'll be about 12 and a half hours. Sharing of people's stories and knowledge and everything else about high tide or about tidal water. So if it's part of your life and you'd really like to do something, all you need to do is go to highwater.org, and I'm just going to put that into because it's high-water.org. So I've just put that in the chat. Go there. You can read about the project and you can fill in the form. It's free. We've got contributions coming in from all over the world, which is fantastic. And I'm mentioning it now because it happens before our next First Friday. And the deadline for putting in a submission is the 15th. So that's just a little reminder for that. So I won't take up any more time, and I'm going to pass this over to Carolyn.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to show a presentation that I made. I was really worried that, because I had my vaccine the other day, that I was going to be ill. So I made one with a recorded narration, but I'm going to do this one live. So I'll try and keep to the time. At least the recorded one kept to the time. So I'll fire it up anyway. So basically, it's a kind of reflection on my practice, really. And it was really helpful for me to do it because it made me kind of put a review on what I've been up to for the last 4 years. So I'm Carolyn Black, and I did an MA in fine art in the late 90s. I came out with my MA doing a lot of digital video and installation work, having gone in as a printmaker. So I've kind of got quite a diverse background. And the practice, etc., was all going fine until I very stupidly, in some ways, got involved with an arts organisation in Bristol around 2000 and started curating, producing. And of course, my practice actually slips away gradually. So for me, actually January, only 4 years ago, I came back to my practice in earnest. And I found myself kind of revisiting lots of different mediums. And I've actually preparing for this, thinking, what am I going to talk about? I thought, well, actually, I'd like to talk about that. Why do I move from one thing to another? And how do I find that useful? So I started thinking about dichotomies, how I've personally like to work with my mind intellectually, do a lot of research, reading, writing, but I also love the physical aspects of making art, whether it's going out walking, filmmaking, printmaking. I make still images and I make moving images. And it's, again, mirrors the sort of difference between the body. I love handmade materials, love getting covered in printing ink, but I also love computers. So I spend hours editing things. So I won't go through single thing. I've called it Switch because I made a film that I actually edited and used my voiceover while I was trying to understand how that film was going to be. And I found myself, oh, it's going on automatically on its own. Hold on. I found myself saying switch. So I'll do switch now. So switch, this is drawing on black on white paper, charcoal and chalk on white paper, opposite sides of the River Severn. And this was all researched for a publication, which you'll probably see in a minute, and I can't control it, it seems. And so the top one is on the east side of the river, on the east side of the Severn, and that's at Purton Rex. And then the bottom one is at Orr, up the road from me. And this was a whole project about both sides of the Severn. I started travelling from here in Newnham-on-Severn in the Forest of Dean to Chepstow, across the bridge, back again, and taking photos, doing drawings, doing a bit of writing, and I brought all of that together into a book, which you'll see shortly. I think I'm talking faster now than this was recorded. So, and this is the opposite. So I'm looking at both sides. So drawing on black paper, this is not the river, it's Sudeley Ponds in the Forest of Dean, and it's deceptive. This is actually nearly 2 meters wide, this drawing itself. So it looks very different in the real world to what it does on the screen. And again, that was kind of a real challenge, thinking about how can I draw out this image from this black paper. It's quite alarming. This is the publication that contains all of the first panoramic drawings. It's 7-side, an artist's view of the river, and Art.Earth very kindly let me use the imprint, so it's available on their site. And the book itself was designed to respect the panoramic nature of the drawings that went in it. It's a kind of narrated journey. I invite the reader to come with me on a journey, a circular journey, that takes them down along one side of the river and up the other, and crosses over from Arlingham to Newnham on an imaginary ferry journey. There used to be a ferry crossing there. So those things are particularly connected. I'm going to see if I can manually switch. Switch, it does. This is a film from this side of the river, Newnham, looking at Garden Cliff. It was called As Above, So Below, and it was the first film that I used this switch in, this idea of taking the viewer from one thing to another. This is the only still, I can't believe I chose this one, it's the only part of the film that actually isn't split screen. The rest is split screen. There's a lot of switching going on, and you will see that in a moment. And now I'm going backwards for some reason. Just trying to work out how to turn that on. So it's a really short excerpt here. It's just the beginning, and I'm hoping that your computers can cope with it, but if not, you'll just see a still.
As above, so below. A swing is swinging, slow-mo.
And at that point in the film, it goes switch, which I don't have, but I have shared a link for that. So,
As above.
Why is it not going? There we go. So this is a print made from that film, and you can see it's a photogravure print. These are just A4, they're not huge. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see there's an oak tree there, and you probably can't see because it's so tiny. I'm drawing underneath the tree. So I'm drawing the view from underneath the oak tree, and on the right-hand frame, which are the parts that keep switching, there are views from below the tree. It's made with a complex array of cameras. I planned it very carefully, and I arrived with a 360-degree camera, a video camera, an iPad, and drawing materials. And this is what the print looks like. So that's a photogravure, and I retrained in doing printmaking again. Having done that 180 for a long time, I picked up a 360-degree camera, and it started exploring walking as an action in a circular movement. So these are all stills. There's one called 12 Walks, Circular Walks, which is on my YouTube. I'll give you the link in a minute, actually. And these were made throughout the whole year, so they're all seasonal, and I walked in circles around the camera. I wanted to avoid the gaze of the lens, and the 360, it's hard to hide. So after hiding behind cars and bushes for quite some time, I decided I'd film myself at an optimum distance so that I could create this circular movement without feeling uncomfortable about being part of the film. And I always like to say that it's the opposite to Richard and Long, who strides across Richard Long, who strides across in a masculine way, and I just amble around in a feminine circle. So it's a very playful piece, and they're quite good fun when you see them all together. This is part of one of the Walking the Land exercises that we do on Fridays at the same time as this. I set off on my walk and realized that actually on the way to the destination, I was moving towards a rainbow, and I really loved the idea that as I crossed over the railway line, I saw the rainbow, and I thought, well, I'll just take photos on my way to the oak tree. The oak tree, you can see in the bottom left-hand frame, is the end of a muddy field. On the right-hand frame is a photo from underneath the oak tree, which is actually very similar to As Above, So Below. And that's because it's the same place. So it's a favourite place of mine to walk to. And putting this together, it just seemed to make sense to actually try and explain this connection between one thing and another. Another switch. I also love seeing the mud and the patterns in the River Severn, and these were, I made a film from while I was walking across the Severn Bridge. The view from up above onto the landscape is just tremendous. It's absolutely wonderful. I don't know whether anybody's done it. So these are actually stills from the film, and I just wanted to try and work with them in a new way, something that wasn't drawing, wasn't film, wasn't photo. And somebody told me about something called jelly prints. So I acquired one of these jelly print blocks, and I don't know whether anybody's used one. It's a bit like doing a monoprint on a sheet of wobbly jelly, basically. So quite hard to control, but very interesting. And I felt that working with white on black would really give that sense of that muddiness, that sort of the dark, and then the revelation of the light material on the surface. These are about 6 inches square, printed on, you know, archive quality black paper. And I must admit, I'm very fond of them. But one of the things about doing them is they are very hit and miss. You know, it's very sensitive to temperature. If the ink's too wet, it goes all sloppy. If it's too dry, it's dull. So I end up with quite a lot of kind of pieces that I feel that aren't finished works, so to speak. But I want to play with. So I've kind of been playing around with them a bit. Another switch, oops, and that's just jumped one. So I started picking up some of my favorites that I didn't feel were complete in some way, and I've started drawing on them. And this is just using a watercolor pencil and water, just trying to kind of pull out more about that muddiness about them. These are not finished, either of these two. I've just started fiddling about with them, really. And I'd love to have a chat with everybody about that, whether it kind of feels like to me as if I'm using rejects. And then I thought, well, actually Degas used to use his pale lithos for doing pastels on top, so it's not too much of a cheat. And if he can do it, so can I. So that's how I feel about it. And that's it. I've gone through very quickly, I think. I haven't been looking at the clock, but it did give me an opportunity just preparing this for some reflection and reviewing what I've been doing and trying to make some sense of it in a way. So yeah, very welcome. I'd be really happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Can you, yeah, there you go. Lovely, thank you.
Okay. So anybody got anything to say?
I'm very, I'd love to know more about this gelatin print process.
Okay, I'll get you one actually. Hold on. I've just tidied up my studio, so I actually know where everything is for a change. So this is the, this is one. So it's a round wobbly thing. It's like that. You can actually make them homemade with glycerin and real, you know, animal gelatin, or probably vegetarian gelatin as well. And you buy inks for them. You experiment quite a lot. Aqua, AKUA, seem to be the best inks to use. And you can roll the ink onto the surface, and you can press things into it, different materials, and then take a print from that. So it's really hard to explain. It's very, very time consuming because you just get obsessed. Well, I did anyway. And you end up doing lots and lots of things, but it's a very different way of working. You can transfer print as well from magazines and things, although I've not, you know, that's not what I'm aiming to do anyway at the moment. But there's lots of videos about them on YouTube, mostly American ladies doing Bible bookmarks and things like that. So you have to get a bit past that till you start finding more experimental things. I think what I'm doing is probably more experimental than the majority of the videos on YouTube about it, but you learn a lot by looking, seeing what other people are doing.
Is there anyone else you'd like to ask Carolyn a question? Just put your hand. Yeah, Liz.
I was just interested. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. I was just interested in that moment when you were talking about the 360-degree photos, and you said you discovered that you had to put yourself in there.
Mm.
And it's something that I encountered recently in my own work, and I was just wondering what that was like, you know, because actually we are there, aren't we? You know, and in all that work, it's like as artists we're there, yeah. And sometimes you find yourself in front of that place where it goes, well, actually, no, you've really got to be in there. You know?
I know, it was, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I'm really happy filming and taking photos, but I just don't like being in them myself. And I did start looking at, oops.
I'm mute.
Okay. I looked at art historical references about this, trying to get my head around it. And I was thinking about Caspar David Friedrich, when he started putting, you know, him sort of posing in the landscape, or a man posing in landscape with a cane and very domineering, talking about the sublime. And I thought, well, I don't feel like that, but I could use that posture. So I started taking, when I was filming the river, because I didn't want to be like useless in the image, because you are 360 or filmed wherever you are, I would go and stand by the river and take this sort of pose like the man, you know, with the cane. And I ended up taking a walking stick with me doing it. And then that's how this circular things derived from that. I thought, well, I'll just do what those men do, is have this sort of assertive pose with a stick, and I'll walk around. So a lot of the films of me doing circle, I have a stick with me. So I'm kind of emulating that masculine perspective on the landscape. A bit of a parody, a playfulness with it, really. If that makes sense.
Anyone else? Yeah, Anna.
Hi, I was just wondering, Carolyn, during your walking, what you learned from the river?
Oh gosh, I learn something different every time I go. I think what I have really become aware of, because I've been kind of looking at it for years. I mean, I lived on the other side of the river for 25 years. What I've learned most recently is about the fact that I can be there and working, and I'm having a very different experience to other living things that go to the river, because my very presence scares them all away. And I kind of became very aware that often when I finish filming, drawing, whatever it is, and I pack everything away, it's kind of the minute I turn away, like a whole load of birds will fly over my head, or something really exciting happens on the river. And it's almost like those things have been waiting for me to go away. So I've been making a whole series of films about seen and unseen. I've filmed the fog recently, and kind of thought very carefully about what I couldn't see. I made a film where I set the camera up to film behind me, and I narrated what I was seeing in front of me at the time, and a bit like audio describing, I suppose, for theatre. So yeah, that's what I'm really learning from the river at the moment, is what's the impact of me being there. And I don't want to put a trail camera up. That doesn't interest me at all. I'm actually interested in that funny place, that liminal place where whether being there is actually having such a huge impact on the place or not, or the other animals there. That was kind of a one.
Great, thank you. I just love the idea of you sort of firstly being absent and then forcing yourself into the picture and then slowly absenting yourself again.
Yes, I mean, it'd be great to, as I say, the only way I can absent myself away would be to use a trail camera, but that kind of defeats the whole object of the exercise, really. I'm very curious about all of these things.
There are quite a few hands up, but unfortunately, we don't really have time. I need to move on. But Carolyn, if I could ask you if you're happy to share your email, put that in the chat, and then people can contact you directly.
Of course, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. That's great. I'm sure, as you know, quite a few of you said, I wish it could go on longer. Well, yes, so do I. It's quite a problem, really, which unless we did it every day, we can't really resolve. I'm going to ask Jan if she would now join us.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Good. Hello, everybody. Right, well, I'm going to go straight into the pictures. Let's share the screen. Okay.
Yeah, got you.
You in?
Yeah.
Am I in? Yeah, good, good. Okay, so like, I'm really old now. I was born in 1940. And I thought about this talk and just how incredibly innocent things were when I was a child. And this is me on the beach at Padstow, where I was evacuated with my mother. And you know, things have changed just so much. Hang on. There we go. So my father was in the Air Force professionally, and he was in air sea rescue. So I was always near the sea, and we actually lived at the end of this beach, and I looked out over the water. And I was just little. I mean, 6, 7, 8, that sort of. And at that time, of course, children could just go out and play. Even though I was an only child and quite protected, they let me out on the beach, but they said, don't pick up anything that's metal because it might be a bomb. It was the North Sea, and a lot of mines were left over from the war. And this little boy obviously hadn't been told that. And there are some people, well, you know, there's that huge World War II bomb just exploded in Exeter. Yeah, this lot weren't that worried about it. But so anyhow, I was thinking about how these days I'm just always aware of poisons in the air, poisons in the earth, just the way we're completely wrecking the planet. And it was going on then, but nobody knew about it. Well, I didn't know about it. Nobody in my environment talked about it. I mean, this is at Felixstowe, and this was just near where we lived. And that's raw sewage going straight into the sea. We did worry about gas masks and things like that, which were pretty horrible. But it all felt very in control. Anyway, eventually I went to art school at Guildford and learned how to paint in oil paints. And apart from saying that lead was dangerous, nobody talked about toxicity in the materials. And that was my boyfriend, Jeff, who I eventually married. And we had children, and that pretty much put paid to my art practice for a while. But I started thinking, well, I became domestic, I had to. Mother's Pride and Dusty Springfield. Does anybody, I don't know, does anybody here remember Dusty and Mother's Pride? Well, actually, you're all mute, can't you? So I can't hear. But there's a very, very funny little video of her, her promoting Mother's Pride. And, I don't know. I mean, you know, Mother's Pride is the most hideous stuff. But there we were, all eating it, except I was beginning to learn, because of looking after the children, I was beginning to learn about food. And I was also reading New Scientist, which came out in the late 1950s, and I've read it religiously, really, every week since the 60s. And that was teaching me a lot about the world. Anyway, eventually, in my 30s, I moved up to Wales with the children. We lived at the end of the Croesel Valley, which is in Snowdonia, in that wonderful house. And it had running water, and it had a soakaway. So anything that went out of the house went down into our own soakaway. And if anything got blocked up, I had to clear the drains. That was the local village where the children went. It was about half a mile away. And it was a very, very good place to raise children. Yeah, it was just a place wonderful. Marvelous. So I'll go back whenever I can. Anyway, being a valley like that, and I lived a bit to the right, it was basically a U-shaped glacial valley, and Rio Tinto Zinc had its eye on it. This is actually a diamond mine, but they wanted to turn the valley into a hydroelectric scheme. And I started reading things like counter-information services and other yeah, I just started getting educated really via news scientists also about the degradations of the mining industries and just how badly people were paid and how incredibly awful it was for the world. And I was doing pottery, which I'd learned a bit about in art school and then carried on doing it. And this is a project I did with the local school. So all the children in school, there were only about 15 children in school. They all made tiles with history of the valley. And I was beginning to worry a little bit about the materials. I mean, this is a diamond mine, but actually, one of the things I had in the house, because you could just buy whatever you wanted, was uranium oxide, which makes a wonderful yellow glaze. And decided that it wasn't such a good idea to have in the house, and we just took it to the local tip. And I mean, now I look back and I think, how could I have done that? But I did. Nobody really worried about things too much. And it's just been such a long, slow process for me to realize just how much everyday actions are affecting the world. So this place, Redfield Community, which I moved to with the children in the late 70s, early 80s, that was amazing. There was a lot of us, about 50, about half of whom were children. We did a lot of eating as a Christmas party. That's my dad on the right there. He was one of the few parents of any of us who would actually come and visit the community. I mean, it wasn't a hippie commune at all. It was socialist, really, left-wing and educational. But most people's, this was the late 70s, early 80s, and communes were considered to be pretty weird places. I don't know, you might agree by looking at the picture. Oh, it was a Christmas party. And we did every Christmas we would do a gathering outside. And it is lovely for me to look back at all these people. You can see how many children. We were really pretty much outnumbered by the children, but they're a great bunch, and I've stayed in touch with a lot of them, and quite wonderful people, really marvelous. Anyway, I was going to bring up Redfield really was that we did so much discussions. I mean, there was just so much talking and arguing about absolutely everything. And I'd argued a lot with my dad, but in art college, we didn't discuss very much, we just got on and did it. It was very straightforward training. Very, not like art colleges are now at all. Very little theory. But I learned an incredible amount being at Redfield. Most people there had been to university and they knew how to argue their corner. And yeah, it was a real education.
Jen, I'm just giving you a 3-minute warning.
3-minute warning? Oh, shit. Oh dear, that's recorded, isn't it? I'm so sorry. Okay, so anyhow, I'm going to zoom through this. So I was doing lots and lots of glazing, glazing big panels. Can't believe that's me at a kitchen, but it was. My thinking about toxicity in many ways has changed. Working with lusters, and then my dad got dementia, so I moved to Portsmouth to help look after him. Moved into Art Space Portsmouth, fantastic community arts project. We did a lot of work on the beach with rubbish and stuff, very on the top. I was printing with photographing rubbish from lots of glazes, lots of mosaics, beginning to use the ends of glazes. And then I moved to a wonderful studio here in Totnes, still, and looking at the glazes, what do I do with all this poisonous stuff? Started pouring the bits and turning on to libation pieces. But it didn't do so much. So collecting all the bits of glaze and putting them into toxic waste sculptures. Started, let's go quickly through that stuff. Started working with trail, with the plastic that's thrown away, and started working with a group of others, Lorraine and Verity and Christine, on clay that was full of absolute junk and shouldn't go into the tip. So all the metal oxides and things. And what poisonous was it? How toxic is it? How do we decide? We made a whole load of flowers for trail a few years ago. I can't remember which one it was. It was really great working with them. I really enjoyed it. Okay, let's quickly flip through this. This was a crazy. So we did a flower bed in the end. I did a crazy bouquet. That was Lorraine's. Christine's beautiful raku. And then I saw a film which was about plastic bags, and it mentioned off-gassing of plastic. And if I could have 2 minutes extra, Richard, I really appreciate it. So I started thinking about the plastic. It's all very well just turning it into art, saves a bit, but the stuff is off-gassing the whole time. I've been thinking about air and how very fragile the air envelope on the Earth is. And here I am in a studio full of the flipping stuff. What do I do with it? And I've been putting it into bottles to keep my pieces to use in sculptures. And then I thought, well, why not encapsulate them in jars, put them in glass jars, seal them, and then I'm going to label the dates and make sculpture. So this is what I'm really interested in doing at the moment. These are experiments, these are not completed pieces, but the concept is there, and I'm developing it. So putting these bits of plastic in, sealing the jar, making towers out of them. I'm calling them aspirations, because there's the upwards, it's the fragility and the instability of the tall towers. And then I started dating them as a couple I did last week. I glue them together. And then that's glass, but that's another story. Okay, I will stop screen sharing. Sorry, I rabbited on too long.
No, sorry, it's Jan. It's fine. We're doing okay. And it was. I'm sorry to have rushed you there at the end because I know there was lots of scary stuff to talk about. Does anyone have? Would anyone like to come in with a question for Jan? I'm sure that there are quite. Sorry, I've just got my screen back. So, I know there are quite a lot of people concerned with. I think we're much more aware now of toxicity in materials than we have been. Is there anybody in the today's group who has experimented with kind of non-toxic photography? Because I know there's quite a bit of experimentation around that. No, but I don't know enough about it to talk about it, but I know that there has been experimentation with chemicals or non-toxic chemical photography. Obviously, some of the traditional methods of photography were like that anyway. What do we do though? How do we, what do we, how can we get around this? Is there a way around this, particularly with ceramics and yeah.
Richard, just one thing I left out, and which was absolutely crucial, which was when I moved to here to Totnes, the studio I have does not have a drain. Doesn't have a drain out, and that really made me think. I had to think every time I threw something away on the earth that there was a direct responsibility as I tried chucking out copper oxide or cobalt or vanadium or any of these poisonous things. So that was. I'm sorry I missed that out of the talk because that was a really crucial point in my thinking.
Yeah, that's. It's interesting. You talked about living in various places that didn't have access to sewage, but sewage plants are. It's so easy to forget where we're putting stuff, isn't it? Or actually, it's still ultimately in some form or another going into the sea. And that pipe and low stuff that you showed us with the raw sewage going straight into the sea does kind of remind us that things have not always been, we've not always been quite so careful as we are now.
Definitely not.
Okay, well, I think it's time to move on to our last speaker. So where are you? Paeony, yeah. Sorry, I should have said thank you to Jan before Paeony starts.
Am I there?
Yes, you are. We can see you.
Oh, lovely. Right. Sorry. Okay. I'm Paeony, and I'm from Norwich on the opposite side of the UK to you in Devon. And I'm currently taking a year off from my MA in Fine Art. And I'm decided just to have a go with different processes at home, not worrying initially about too much of the meaning behind it, just experimenting with processes. And I'm going to zoom through at hyperspeed, a bit too hyperspeed probably, the different processes to give you, just to see if anybody else might be interested. And then I'm going to mention where I'm going now with it. I started with cyanotypes, which lots of you will know. So I'm just going to change something because I'm blocking the screen for myself. Oh. Right, sorry. And which lots of you know because of Anna Atkins and her seaweed, because I was very into seaweed because I was doing art that was related to marine conservation. And her Victorian experiments are still being repeated today. It hasn't really moved on, and it's an interesting area in that with the cyanotype process, you just use the two chemicals and you brush them on paper, then you put your objects on them, so they're photographs, and you put them out to expose in the sun. So it's still called photography, because, sorry, I didn't mention at the start that it's alternative photography I'm looking at. And then you expose them to light, it comes out like that in the middle, you wash it, and then after a day or two or a few hours, it comes out like that at the end. And what I was searching for all the time was to try and get more and more definition. Now, you can do lots of other things. People sometimes I think it's a little bit go overboard. You can put turmeric in, you can put salt, sugar, all sorts of things, cling film. And here's one example, whoops, sorry, which shows on the right, which I quite like that one. It looks almost like ice cracking. And finally, we were allowed to go out to the sea. And so I could resume my interest in seaweed. And so I collected seaweed, and I could start doing some seaweed cyanotypes. Not at the, I don't know how Anna Atkins managed to get her amazing fine detail. I really don't know. Here are some cyanotypes. Trouble is, it's all very blue, obviously, and it's all about silhouettes really. And yet when I wanted a different way of, it's all about a different way of seeing, but it didn't quite grab me. And when you look at, I got an underwater camera as well, and when you look at the real seaweed, I decided to try something new anyway. But I'll just say, first of all, that if you're interested in cyanotypes, then an artist I really like is Megan Rippenhoff. I definitely recommend taking a look at her work. And I also try, the nice thing about cyanotypes is they are more sustainable, and they're not toxic for the sea, so you can put them in the sea and they won't hurt anything, which is wonderful. And I tried various experiments, but it didn't quite work. But at that point, I started to realize that it wasn't just, although I was thinking I'll just master processes, that wasn't really it. My interaction with the environment was just as important, and how I collected the material to me, rather than the outcome. It was kind of daunting process. Anyway, I moved on to something else, another form of alternative photography, lumen prints, which is just like cyanotypes, but instead of the cyanotype liquid painted onto the paper, you use photographic paper and place something on top. Now this, I took this last night, this is all my paper I've accumulated. It's a heck of a lot, but I started off with only one pack or so, but I've been collecting it. You use old paper, new paper, you can use fogged paper, expired paper, some of the papers like 50 years old, doesn't matter. It's not as, you don't need the same sensitivity for lumen prints. And once again, you put, here's some sea lettuce, you put your seaweed onto the photographic paper, you put it out in the sun, and you let it stew or cook, or whatever you want to call it, and then you take off the seaweed or peel it off, and you're left with an image again. So here's another one. I actually found a crab skin almost there, and you get some wonderful colors. Every single photographic paper has a slightly different chemical composition, so you get different colors. But there's one big problem. The colors are transient. They will vanish completely in time, and a very short time. So what I read you should do was use fixer, but the fixer creates uniformity. You lose all the colors, and so instead of you know, all the different colors, you get a lumen tan orange, which came as monotonous as a cyanotype blue. But I still carried on and took more photographs of my work. I found I liked going for walks. I did a little natural history collection. You're lucky down your way, you've got kelp. We haven't up here in Norfolk, so I had friends send one to me. And that unfortunately didn't work, my big one of that, but anyway. And I can't remember what was this about, but I was still going to see. And, oh yes, I was going to mention as well, using some sun in the UK can be a bit problematic with the rain and things. So I did eventually get myself a UV lamp, which is helpful. So when it's wet days, I don't get grumpy. Now, I'd sort of got so far and I was getting fed up with the fixer. And I was at the same time was when you were talking before, Richard, mentioned about the photography, sustainable photography. The place that's got loads of stuff about is the London Alternative Photography Collective. They've got a website. And they also do lots of workshops too on creating seaweed developer and things like that. So I watched quite a few of these, and it's something I haven't quite got into yet, but will do. And because I got distracted slightly, because I also, with Zoom, the School of Light in Los Angeles, because everything's gone Zoom, they have courses too, but they're from a photographic point of view, and chemicals are fine by them. And I've sort of got caught in that, and I need to uncatch myself, so to speak. So the big thing about joining them was because they're photographers, it was about photography. I was made aware that I don't have to worry about having a final print and fixing it. I just embrace the transient nature of it, take photographs along the way, and the photographs are your art and not the actual print. And that made a big difference to me. And also what I really needed at home in lockdown and everything was motivation. So this really gave me the motivation. You're not taught on this course in that you're just given a verbal description of something, but you share your work. And that really helped me get motivated. And so these are, now you can see more how they vary now. They're not just the orangey yellow. They're all different. I like the lettuce leaf. And but I found that as I was doing that, although lumens are about a different way of seeing, I needed more purpose. And I began to focus again on the walking and the collection of natural objects. And for example, this is a wild hop I collected on a walk by a river, and it sort of echoes the shape of the river, which I rather liked. Norwich City Walk, I have to admit, if your plant hangs over onto the pavement, beware of my scissors. I'm sorry. But I like to plot walks. Some types of paper are very, very thin, so you can put several layers, so you can get an exposure beneath another piece of paper. And I like that because it gave a sense of time and of walking and one plant appearing, another one disappearing, and of faded memories. It's all about just playing with process, really. I like going on countryside walks, and then I focused on the wild margins of crops. Norfolk Broads, I looked at different ways of displaying images. My garden over time, I kept thinking, these are from the garden in the winter, and I thought maybe I should do something like that. There are problems with recording lumens. Glossy paper, you can see here the reflections in it. So I had to, in the end, get myself a scanner. Colour matching is a problem, moisture, there are problems. Now, I've just thought I'd go through some of the issues because it sounds easy just plonking something down on a piece of paper. Every paper is different. So here's an apple, different papers. You can see that they're all black and white papers. You can use colour photographic paper, but it's not quite the same. Here's some colour ones. You're using the same, this is the same paper, but different exposures. So here we've got 19 hours for this one. This one's outside under 2 hours. I actually prefer this one, even though it's not as distinct. 6 hours, it all varies. You never quite, I love the fact you lift something and you have a discovery. The condition of the paper is important too. Some of them very old. This was a paper that had actually some mildew on it and things, but I actually love this one from the imperfections in it. There's inherent moisture in a lot of things, and that's why you get the halo effect around everything as the moisture seeps out. And the more, if you use something again and again and the moisture goes, that's an interesting thing as well. The translucency of the objects is very important because that's how much light can shine through. So this leaf was marvellous for the veins showing, but a lot of the plants at this time of the year seem quite thick because it's winter and cold, and you don't get the same. One of the interesting things as well is ambiguity. You don't know, you can sometimes do where you don't know what it is. And this is apple peel. I love the blue from one side of the apple and the other. Some plants provide more opportunities than other for ambiguity. I like this one too. And that was what it was originally. I discovered on the in these group course that I can't have misspelled assignment, that inorganic stuff just doesn't do it for me. We had to do inorganic things, but it doesn't have a heart and soul to me. I want to, nature is what's important for me. So that was a bit of self-discovery. I then went on to cyanolumens, which combines cyanotype liquid with lumens. You can paint it on the paper, the photographic paper, or you can paint the cyanotype liquid on the plant and then put it on the photographic paper. With that, it's even more transient. You have to wash and unwash, you have to wash the cyanotype liquid off. So here's the one on the left is it with it on and then off, but you're photographing it so you can photograph all stages. Again, ambiguity is interesting. This is a clementine peel, a citrus peel on the sides of it, and a slice of it. And this was the one I showed earlier. That's figs I found on the ground, little tiny fallen figs. I like that one. I'm finding more and more I like ones that aren't so obvious. I then, because I thought, oh, well, let's try something new, tried again refractographs, I think that's, which is another form of alternative photography, but this one does use a camera, but it uses a lensless camera. And it's quite tricky, and it sounds, you just hold the glass up to the camera without a lens and a torch shines from the other end and you photograph it. And it was quite frustrating because it's actually very tricky to make it work.
Peony, I'm just interrupting you and giving you a 2-minute warning.
Thank you. And you had lots of interesting patterns, but again, there was somebody else on the course who was very much interested more in physics, so he loved it. But for me, it wasn't nature, so I wasn't wild over it. Moving on then, the cold weather we've just had, ice lumens. I thought before it was all about sunshine and warmth, but it's not. You can get the most amazing things if you put them out in the icy weather. I particularly like this one because it's melting water. And you can have the icicles melting on it. And I tried putting bits of seaweed and things in ice and then doing a lumen. And then finally, at the moment, I've just started a chemigrams course, which is, I'm not yet into it because it's the chemicals and things that it's too far from nature for my liking. And I actually found that I had a sore throat and a nosebleed from the chemicals when I was doing it. So I don't know how I'm going to go with that. But the soil chromatography is something I am very keen on because I love physical geography. And just to finish with 2 things that are where I've been heading. I use the attributes of lumen photography, which I thought well displayed. These are oyster shells that I found at in Norfolk at a old Roman town. The badgers had unearthed them, so they're just lying around. And these are like 2,000 years old. And I just felt the way, just the lumen somehow gave them an ethereal feel that sort of hinted at the past and things. So I thought that was very appropriate. And also I just thought here I'd show you that I tried all different papers first before I found this one in the bottom left, which was the one I liked. And then finally, what I'm doing with a lot of the flower lumens now. I've never wanted to do flowers to begin with, but the flower lumens, I'm going to Ravenham Sculpture Trail print them using UV printing onto very large glass headstones, about 9 of them. And so it's all about a different way of seeing, and the glass is about how you normally see through the everyday wildflowers. And the headstones remind us to appreciate what we have now and not when it's gone. And so that's basically been a quick trip through what I've been doing the past 8 months, and there's loads to alternative photography that I haven't even begun to, and very complex, but I don't have dark rooms or anything like that, and I'm just exploring and seeing where I go. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peony, for that quick tour around your experiments of late. We have a few minutes left, so there's been some really amazing stuff going on in the chat while you've been talking. So I would recommend you to have a look at that afterwards. But before we call it a day, are there some questions that people would like to ask? Just give me a wave. Yeah, Judy.
Yeah, I was always told that cyanotype fluid was poisonous and that you shouldn't put it down the watercourse. And I even got in touch with South West Water about it, who talked about how much you could put down safely and what you couldn't.
Oh.
So I was a bit intrigued when you were putting them in the sea.
I was told several times that they were non-toxic, and there's a lot of work now with the sea. So I'll admit I'm confused then, because there's a lot of people do work with the sea now with cyanotypes, because unlike things like photographic fixer, which you mustn't put down the drain as it inhibits the bacteria that breaks down things. So now I'm confused. I'll have to find out now more. But I was told several different places that it was the one thing that was okay, because I was very worried about that at first. Can't wait, I don't know.
I'm going to do some more research too, then.
I'll be interested.
Yeah, Rachel Allen, who's lurking there, has done some work with this. Rachel, I don't know if you know anything about the relative toxicity of cyanotype, but she's still lurking, so that's all right. Who's that?
Hi, I am here.
Oh, you are there. Very good. Is it? Have you done any research on that aspect of it?
Yeah, I think it's actually because there are a lot of chemicals in the sea, and I think actually they kind of disperse quite easily, and I don't think there is a great sort of risk of toxicity.
I suppose there is a difference between that kind of literally minute input to the sea versus pouring something down the drain where it's much more concentrated. I don't know.
Sure. No, I don't think it's an issue. I mean, the pre-coated papers, because when I was on the Ephemeral River residency, Richard, with you, I was using pre-coated papers and doing that group work with the river and the sort of intertidal sort of zone, or the non-tidal zone.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
But perhaps I won't put it in rock pools then.
Yeah, no, probably not. Anyone else? No.
Peony, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I think you've done an environmental science degree, and how's that fed into your work? And did you go straight from your degree in environmental science to your MA, or did you do a BA in fine art or something in between?
My environmental science degree is from the 1980s, when lots of people didn't even know what it was and said, oh, is that about farming? And they didn't even know what it was. Very start. It does go into all my work, because I think I did the degree because I was very interested in it. But then I went into publishing, because I'm also a children's book author, which I've put to the side now, and I've returned to my interest in art. And I've gone straight from doing lots of courses to an MA without actually having the BA, and I always feel in art, and I always feel very conscious of that. But it does definitely feed into my work, which I think it's just, I was doing quite a bit on my MA before, about how art is perceived, environmental art, and the impact it has. And I was very interested, I was looking all at marine conservation because of that, and sustainable fishing and things. So it has all fed in. I find that whatever I do, that's why I'm not so sure about this chemigrams and things, because everything I do relates back to the environment in some way. So it feeds into it because I've got a natural interest in it. And it also makes me slightly skeptical sometimes about greenwashing as well. Because we did much work on whether something really was green or not, and it's surprising the number of times that it isn't, and so it's tricky. It's a very tricky area. But
Great, thank you very much. Caroline, go on. We'll give you a quick minute there. Can you unmute, David?
Yeah. There's always a delay here. Peony, I think you should just look at the cyanotype as being an irritant rather than a outright toxic material, because at the end of the day, I think even getting out of bed is kind of, you could say you're putting your imprint on Earth just getting out of bed. So I think your journey with your work has been absolutely fantastic, and I think the imagery is so strong, and I love the way you're kind of progressing through your layers of thoughts as well. I kind of see them as sort of been building over the last 7 or 8 months. And yeah, I think it's really exciting. So thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. I must admit, we're using a computer now, aren't we? Which is definitely not sustainable. So,
okay, last one, Jan, go on.
Thanks. Peony, I loved your work, really, really beautiful. How are you going to be printing on the glass?
I discovered it's called a large format UV printer. I don't understand it because I can't use the university at the moment because I'm intermitting until I start again in May. But it's a printer, it's a weird printer that can print on all sorts of flat surfaces. I gather first year students love to print on white bread. You can print on bread. Yes, it's very popular, that is. I gather sliced bread. So you can definitely print on glass. How long it will last, I'm not sure. I gather I can use a primer, then print, and then another layer of primer that it does. And they've said it's certainly lasted over the winter and things when they've had it outside. So for my own use, I think it should be long enough. But
because you can, I've printed, I've had digital prints transferred into metal oxides and then fired them onto glaze, onto a glazed surface. But you can do this onto glass as well. So maybe you and I should talk, and perhaps I could fire one of your pieces onto a piece of glass, and then that would be there for thousands of years.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Yes, I'll definitely get in touch to find out more.
Fun to do, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yes. That sounds amazing.
Fantastic session. Thank you, everybody. I just did want to throw in one last comment. It's the thing I found really interesting was the concept of kind of capturing ephemerality in the process of it decaying. That seems like a wonderful kind of almost an oxymoron to me. It's wonderful. It's a very wonderful idea to be doing that. Anyway, we are out of time. Thank you everybody for coming along. Next month we've got a special because we kind of linked with our Borrowed Time project. We have the editor from Black Mountain. No, not Black Mountain. I was thinking Black Mountain because of Jan's talk. Dark Mountain, I should have said, who they're about to release their next book, and which has a working title of Requiem, but I think it's going to change. And Charlotte will be talking to a poet and a writer. I don't know who they are yet, but watch the website for that. And then in May, we'll be back with another session like this. So thanks everybody for coming along. And it's been a really good session. And yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Look out for it on the website.